I was always smaller, shorter, effeminate, soft-spoken, and I feel like people saw that as a weakness and they picked on me for that, especially middle school. But the thing about it was like none of the adults really did anything about it. Like they were very complicit. That's part of the reason why it took me so long to like accept the fact in myself that I was queer, because it's like I didn't want to prove them right.
All right. Can you please say your name, pronouns, and what you identify as?
My name is V. Anderson. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as trans.
All right. And how long have you identified as trans?
I've identified as trans since, well, I think I knew I was trans around like 2019, around quarantine, but I've been transitioning since about 2021.
So talk more about that moment you realized you were trans during quarantine.
Um, I had a friend, her name was Bryn, and she showed me Arca. And I saw, I was like following her Instagram and I saw her body and I was like, yeah, this is what I want. At the time, I was also watching Pose, and I related to the characters so much, especially Angel.
Okay. So what were you identifying as before that moment?
Um, a boy, a gay boy. I mean, I came out as bisexual, but yeah.
And what was it like coming out as trans? Had you already come out previously as gay and you were correcting it, or was it just a natural evolution?
Yeah, so first I came out as bisexual. So I've only ever came out as trans, like family wise, to my mom.
Okay.
Um, because I felt like she was the only adult in my life that I could really talk to about it. Um, like I said, my friend showed me Arca. So I showed my mom Arca, and I was like, I explained to her, like, uh, Arca is trans, and this is what, you know, this is the effects that it has on your body. There was like a nude picture of Arca
Yeah.
with like her chest out, and she had like little tiny like budding breasts,
Yeah.
but they were like small. And I showed my mom that. We were sitting like on like our back porch, and I was telling her like, I've been feeling this way for a while. Like I'm uncomfortable in my body. Things like facial hair and having a deep voice, and being just overall just being masculine made me uncomfortable, and it made me like not like myself. Um, and she couldn't understand it. Like she would be like, "Oh well, why don't you just shave your hair? Shave your facial hair?" And I would be like, "Well, because I feel like it shouldn't be there in the first place." Um, but my mom, I didn't feel any judgment from my mom, but she was hesitant to the idea at first. Um, I think it was difficult for her to know that her child was uncomfortable with themselves and didn't like their body. I think that's a hard thing for a mother to hear.
Of course.
Um, and for that reason, she she was also hesitant to let me begin the process of HRT. But eventually, like she was telling me, that I should wait till I was an adult,
Okay.
because if I was an adult and did it, that would be a different thing than her allowing me to do it as a child, because she was like, oh, well, I don't want you to grow up and regret anything. Which I understand her point of view on that. But to me, like thinking about my future, thinking about the puberty changes that I was already going through, I didn't want any more of that. Like after a certain point of you going through puberty, certain things are like irreversible. So I wanted to start as soon as I could. Um, and I became like depressed because I was living like in a body that I didn't like. So I was just increasingly not liking myself. And
Yeah.
my mom saw that. And that's when we began the process of um, getting me on HRT. And that was around 10th grade.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you think it took more than just you being open with her? She kind of had to see that change and that lack
exactly.
to
Yeah,
start embracing it.
she had to see how much it affected me
Okay.
in order to really grasp, you know.
Mhm. So how has being trans affected your daily life? You know, everything from dating to, just walking around, waking up in the morning, getting dressed, tell me about that.
Jeez, being trans affects everything. Um, my daily life. Well, I like when I leave the house, I have to make sure that I look a certain way um, because I don't think that it's safe for me to be androgynous. I don't think it's safe for me to have both male and female features. I think it has to be one or the other in order for me to feel safe and walk outside and not have people stare at me, things like that. And so sometimes I can be a little bit hard on myself about that. Um,
You think androgyny is harder for people to understand?
yes, I do. I don't think there's, I don't think the world makes space for androgyny. Um, as far as dating is hard. Dating is really hard because first you have to find a guy that is into trans women, and then you have to find a guy that's into trans women who's not weird. It's like you have to go through the same dating process as everyone else does, but more, you know. Um, and it can be lonely sometimes. Um, I find that like a lot of guys are into trans women, but only like sexually, and it can be very degrading.
So more on that about how you are perceived, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because um, you said your mom saw you, how you were waking up in the morning, how you were feeling, and then now you're living on your own. You're in college. Do you think that that change of environment kind of affected how you interact with your transness, your routine, or you know?
Absolutely. Um, it wasn't just my mom. It was my stepdad, my
Mm-hmm.
brothers, my grandma, my aunt. You know, all my like immediate family
Yeah.
were like watching me change, and I feel like when I first came out as trans, I kind of eased into it. You know, like I would wear the makeup, but it would be natural and nobody could really tell. And then I would wear like maybe girls' clothing, but they weren't like too girly, you know. But like over time, gradually, um, but even then, I would still get like looks, like little side eyes, little comments, especially from my grandma and the older people in my family. Um, so now I don't have to worry about that, and it's
Yeah.
much easier. And I also think that coming to a place where people don't really know you also helps a lot. Um, I find that like the people who misgender me the most are people I knew before my transition. It's like the people who knew me as a boy, like my past friends, old teachers, you know, family. Yeah. Um, I remember like some days like I would wear makeup to school. And again, like it would be natural, but I would like wipe it off every day, like on the bus before I walked into my house. And this was after I had already,
Really?
yeah, this was after I had already came out, but I just didn't want to get like the comments, you know, for my
Completely
family.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And we've talked about this in private, kind of how you come into Ringling, how you've evolved, your gender presentation, even since you came to this school. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Wait, say that question one more time. My gender transition.
Cut. So we've
Okay.
talked a bit, in private, about when you came to Ringling, how you presented your pronouns compared to now
Mm-hmm.
was different.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, so I say that I'm trans, and most of the time, like I don't really call myself a trans woman. I just say trans. Um,
Why is
because
that?
because I feel like the way I feel about myself and my identity is more complicated than that. And so a lot of the times I will say androgyny, but again, like I will identify myself as androgynous, but I feel like I don't really present myself androgynous as I want to because again, like I feel unsafe doing that. Um, but I mean, when I got here, and again, I was more free and I had less to care about like what people think because I didn't know anyone here. So I was able to play with my gender expression more, and over time, it's gradually become like more feminine. Um, and so most of the time, I mean, sometimes I will say that I'm a woman or like social. I understand that I socialize myself as a woman. Um, so
Is there any part of you that wished you could be more androgynous at times?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I used to identify as non-binary,
Oh.
and at the time, I was taking hormones, but I still had like more masculine features, and most people just thought I was like a gay boy who was like a little feminine, you know. Um,
And that bothered you.
actually, actually no, because I feel like I was so used to being socialized as a boy
Mm-hmm.
that being called he, him didn't really bother me. Um, what I would do was I would like let people gender me, like like if people called me he, him, I know that they saw me as a boy. If someone called me they, them, I knew that they like actually saw me and like they actually like understood that I was non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I got here and I took a gender and sexuality studies class, and we watched a film about a person who was non-binary, and I saw how like that person actually like ungendered themselves. Like they didn't use any pronouns at all, and they would tell people to just call them by their names, which I don't remember their name, so I'm using they, them, sorry. But I realized that like I was kind of doing the opposite. Like I I didn't ungender myself. I let other people gender me.
So you were letting other people's perceptions dictate yourself.
No, No, I feel like I always, I,
Girl, no.
no, but that's a good question.
Okay.
I always like express myself how I wanted to, but I just saw how that person was so dedicated to like not allowing other people to address them in a way that they didn't like.
Okay.
I didn't do that. Um, so then I realized like maybe I'm not non-binary.
Okay.
Maybe I am a little binary, and that's why I feel like my the way I feel about my gender is a little complicated, and I don't think I have found the words completely, you know, to describe that.
Okay. So back to that question about your environment and how that impacts, not only how you identify but how you present. Um, what would you say it's like being queer, being trans in Florida? Ooh.
I mean, I have an answer, but I don't know where to begin. Growing up, it was hard. I feel like even before I knew I was gay or not heterosexual, I feel like people saw that in me before I did. And I feel like I was, you know, I was always smaller, shorter, skinnier, more effeminate, soft spoken. And I feel like people saw that as a weakness and picked on me for that, especially middle school. Like,
Oh yeah,
children are so harsh.
absolutely.
But the thing about it was like, none of the adults really did anything about it. Like, they were very complicit with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's probably why it took me so long. That's part of the reason why it took me so long to like accept the fact in myself that I was
Yeah.
queer, because it's like I didn't want to prove them right.
Yeah, it's almost like you're admitting to it.
Yeah,
Like as
yeah,
if it's a bad thing.
yeah, and it's like the whole time like, oh, I've been denying it, you
Right.
know. So, um, yeah, and once I was already out of the closet, I mean, high school was a little better. Like, I feel like people were less confrontational and they wouldn't like say things to your face, but like they would say it behind your back, and like whisper, and I would always hear. And I developed like heavy social anxiety from that.
Mm-hmm.
I just always felt like no matter where I went, like people didn't like me because I was queer or gender nonconforming. Um, my neighborhood has a lot of like lakes and bodies of water, and it's just very nice scenery within nature. And so I would go on a lot of walks, and I would notice that like people would like stare at me like in their cars, and so I
Just enjoying your life, like,
yeah, like I felt like I didn't even feel comfortable like going outside. Yeah,
and you didn't feel comfortable at home either.
you know.
Wow.
Um, but once I was able to get on HRT, I think I started HRT in 11th grade.
With your parents' permission.
Yes. As a minor, you have to get your parents' permission. Um, so 11th grade, yeah, the beginning of 11th grade, or maybe the end of 10th grade. Um, I started off with hormone blockers.
Mm-hmm.
And then on my 17th birthday is when I started taking estrogen in the pill form. And this was around 2021 to 2022. That summer, um, Ron DeSantis like went on this whole like anti-trans agenda, and all that was almost taken away from me. So I was able to get all of this done in person. Like, I had a real doctor, a real place to go. Like, she knew me, like, we talked. She would ask me questions and get to know me. And I was able to get therapy at that same place, because before you start hormones, you have to get therapy. You have to have, like, a therapist diagnose you, like, you have gender dysphoria in order for you to get on HRT. And I, when Ron DeSantis passed those laws about minors getting on HRT, he also criminalized the doctors. He threatened to like put them in jail. So my doctor left. I don't know where my doctor went. And
You didn't get any communication about the change.
no,
You just found it out online.
yeah. Well, I found it out online first, and then I think they called my mom, and they were like, "Well, yeah, your doctor left, and so you're gonna have to find a new doctor." And my
Like,
doc,
flee the state?
I don't know, but probably,
Oh my god.
and I can't blame her if she did. Um, but yeah, like I before she left, she had prescribed me like maybe 3 months worth of hormones to last me like as she left. Um, and so I had to end up finding other ways to get it. Um, it took me a while. I think it took me about a year.
So you had a pause in your reception of HRT.
Yes and no. I was still taking the hormones, but I would take them at a lower dosage in order to like preserve what I had. So I would take one pill of the hormone blocker, and I was prescribed 2 pills of the um, estrogen. So I would take one instead of 2 pills of estrogen, and maybe like skip a couple days for the hormone blocker, the testosterone blocker. And so it lasted me like twice as twice as long. Um, but they also blocked my insurance from paying for the hormones. So everything became out of pocket,
My god.
and they were expensive. Like I was paying like maybe close to $80 a prescription. Um, and my parents weren't like, they didn't want to like financially support the HRT. I remember like my dad telling me like he compared HRT to like cosmetic surgery. Um, yeah. So that's been that's been my experience as a trans person living in Florida.
Wow. So how do you think your racial background influences your experience as a trans woman and how people perceive you?
That's a good question. I think on a deeper level, I think every group of people culturally and racially expresses their gender differently. Um, so my gender expression as someone who is feminine and black is different from someone who's feminine and white. But I often find that like my my gender identity is invalidated because of my race. So one time I was coming out of the gym, right? And I saw my friend, and we had previously done a photo shoot. So she had taken photos of me at the beach at night, and she was like sitting at a table in front of the building of my dorm, and she saw me and she like motioned me to come over. So I walked over to her, and she was talking to her friend who was a white gay man. And I noticed that like the closer I got, like the more distant he got. And eventually, like my friend noticed and she said something to him. She was like, "Oh, are you leaving?" And he said out loud, he was like, "Yeah, I'm just super uncomfortable with straight men," and then walked away. And this bothered me for multiple reasons. Number one, because he invalidated my whole identity. I'm not a straight man at all. Um, Number two, maybe I could have understood how he may have interpreted me as a man, because, like I said, it matters how you present yourself when you walk out of the house. I had on joggers, I had on a tank top, and I had on a do-rag. Um, but it felt it felt racial because even if I was a man, I'm not a threatening person, and he treated me like I was disgusting, and it bothered me. I think that he saw me, and not only did he see a man, he saw a black man, and that made him uncomfortable. And so my race is not something that I can separate from my gender or my gender expression, because the world already has their preconceived notions about black people, just like they have their preconceived notions about someone who's feminine and a woman. And so when I navigate the world, I have to consider that I'm both of those things.
Certainly, and I know we've talked about kind of your experience at Ringling. Do you think this school's efforts at creating kind of trans exclusive spaces, do you think those are welcoming to you?
Um, they are, I feel like I could be more participant in the trans spaces here, but I don't feel represented in the trans spaces here, um, because I don't think that I relate to most of the trans people that go here, because again, like we just have different backgrounds, um, and like I said, there's a difference between the way that people of color express themselves versus non-people of color. Um, this is a PWI, and there's already not a lot of black people here. There's not a lot of trans people here either. So it's kind of just like, I don't think it's necessarily the school's fault, the school itself. I think it's just the demographic of people here. I just don't really connect with them like that. But I have found a few
Yeah.
trans people that I connect with here.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your relationship with the Black trans community that you know, in ballroom at least, or you know?
Well, the truth is, trans people are so rare and they're so hard to find, like, in the real world. Most of the trans people I know are online. And I only know one other black trans person personally, like in real life. And that's Cree. And I relate to Cree so much. Like, so much. And I wish I had a bigger community of black trans people in real life. I usually feel like out of place everywhere I go, either because I'm queer or because I'm black. And I think the only place where I felt really I belonged was when we went to the balls in Ybor, the two times I went.
Expand on that. Why did you feel like you belonged there?
Because I saw other black queer people. I had never been in a room filled with that many black queer people. I mean, and it wasn't just trans people, gay people, lesbians, gender nonconforming people as well. Um, and I just knew that completely. There was no judgment for me being who I was there in that space. And it was the most amazing feeling ever.
That's wonderful. So, why did you start doing your profiles?
I started doing queer profiles. Well, this is something, I mean, okay. um, my artwork that I make reflects my experience or the intersectionality of my experience as a queer person and a person of color. And I've always wondered how I could branch outside of my own experience and make it something more universal. But I had a class this semester called Magazine and Writing, and our assignment was to interview a person, and that way we can practice writing profiles for us to eventually be able to submit to a magazine. And I was like, well, what better thing to write about than queer people, especially today? Like, queer people, their rights are under attack in 2025 under Donald Trump. So I was like, I might as well bring awareness to these issues and uplift queer voices. And I think it's important that we hear the perspective of like the everyday queer person, not just like a celebrity or like a influencer, not just someone who's, rich or privileged, but like a regular person that you see every day. I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm. So, you have this piece, it's called Honesty, and it's on your profile. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes. So honesty is like a reflection of my experience finding myself. Um, in the piece, I interview my mom and my grandma, and I ask them the same questions, but they give like totally complete different answers. I asked them like questions about what it was like watching me grow and change. And my grandma, my grandma shows complete signs of like disapproval, while my mom was like totally supportive. Um, in the video, you can hear her saying that she was disappointed when she found out that I was gay. Um, and she says things like, "You will, you were born in the world how you are, and that's never going to change." She tells me that I'll always be her grandson, and to my uncle, I'll always be his nephew. And that refers to before I came out, the way I would like express my queerness was through like photography, and like I would do like little editorial pictures on my Instagram. Um, there was a picture of me, and I was letting my hair grow at the time, so I had it like parted into like two buns, and I was shirtless, and I think I added like pink clouds to it. And at the time, I think one of my cousins followed me, and so he saw the picture.
Your uncle.
No, my cousin saw the picture, and he screenshotted it and sent it to my uncle. And then my uncle sent that to my grandma. And so one day, I was in the living room, and my grandma came home from work, and I was like, "Hey, grandma, how are you?" And she just was kind of like over it, and she kind of was like brushing me off and seemed like she had a little attitude. So I was like, "Oh, what's wrong? Am I in trouble or something?" And then she was like, "Oh, I don't know." I wasn't expecting her to say that. And so I was like, "Uh-oh," like I'm going through my head like, what did I do? And so like she puts her stuff down, she puts down her purse, and she grabs her phone, and she shows me this picture, the same picture I told you about the buns. Um, and in my head, I was wondering like, how did she even get this? Because my grandma doesn't have an Instagram. But I found out that my uncle sent it to her. And there was a message underneath that picture that my uncle sent. He was like, "Why didn't you tell me that he was gay?" And my grandma was like, "Oh, he's not." And so she was asking me, she was like, "Are you like, what is this? Like, I don't like it." And my excuse was like, "Oh, it's just art. It's just a picture. It means nothing." Um, and she left me alone after that. And then, like, maybe 30 minutes to an hour later, she calls me into her room, and she's like, no, she's on the phone with my uncle. My uncle is like, he's livid, and I think he's a little drunk, and he's asking me questions about the picture. And I tell him the same thing. I'm like, it's just a picture, it's just art, it means nothing. And he just wasn't having it. And so he called me all these slurs. He called me a faggot. He said, you're my nephew, you're not my niece, you're a boy, you're not a girl. And all the while, like, my grandma was like holding the phone. She didn't say anything in my defense at all. And so when my grandma said in the video that I will always be her grandson and I will always be a nephew, it was condescending. And for her to tell me that, you know, you were born in the world how you are, that also felt condescending. It's like people are always trying to invalidate the feelings of trans people and like make us feel like we're crazy or like mentally ill. I know what I was born as. I don't need a reminder. That's like the whole point of being trans. Um, but yeah, and where my relationship with my grandma is now, I have never came out to her as trans, but you know, she sees me. Like, I don't tone it down around her. Like, she knows what I look like. She knows how I express myself. But she will still call me he, him. She will still call me her grandson, which I accept because I know that I cannot change her opinions. But that's my grandma, and I love her, and I feel like sometimes we have to meet people where they are if we want to have a relationship with someone. And so I titled the piece Honesty because after all of the disapproval, the statements of disapproval that my grandma said to me, at the end she says, she encourages me to love myself. I know. I know. And she says, you've got to love yourself first or nobody else will. And,
Then nobody else in question.
well, but again, like, that's why I titled it Honesty because
Yeah.
that's the honest nature of like our relationship. Like, that's the honest reality of being trans and navigating the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's a message that you want to share with the world?
Um, there's a quote by Zora Neale Hurston, and it's if you don't talk about your pain, they'll kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And I think that this quote goes beyond pain and oppression. I think that people should talk about how they feel in their experiences more, or else someone else would do that for you and misrepresent you. And so, share your stories.
That's wonderful. Thank you, V.